Everyone, let's talk about the anatomy of the orbit. So, if we talk about the dimensions of the adult orbit, so each eyes it lies within a bony orbit. एक bony orbit के अंदर हमारी eyes होती हैं और उस bony orbit जो होती है वो हमारी 7 bones से बनी होती है. It is made up of 7 bones and the volume of each orbit is slightly less than 30 ml. The shape of the orbit is pear-shaped and the optic nerve it represents the stem or the root. The orbital entrance it averages about 35 millimeter in height, 45 millimeter in width, and it is widest approximately 1 centimeter. It is widest approximately 1 centimeter behind the anterior orbital margin. The depth of the orbit, which is measured from the orbital entrance to the orbital apex, it varies. So the depth of the orbit varies from 40 to 45 millimeter. 40 to 45 millimeter depending on whether the measurement is made along the lateral wall or the medial wall. Race and sex affects each of these measurements. The bony orbit it surrounds the globe and it helps protect it from blunt injury. 7 bones they make up the bony orbit, which are as follows: the frontal, the zygomatic, the maxillary, the ethmoid, the sphenoid, the greater and the lesser wings, the lacrimal bone, and the palatine bone. So, this is the diagrammatic representation of the anatomy of the left orbit. So, the floor of the orbit. Now, this is the floor of the orbit, this much. This is made up of the orbital part of the maxillary bone, the zygomatic bone. This is the zygomatic bone. This is the orbital plate of the maxillary bone and the palatine bone. So there are 3 bones which make the orbit, which make the floor of the orbit: the orbital plate of the maxilla, the zygomatic bone, and the palatine bone. So this is the palatine bone. Remember this small thing, this is the palatine bone. Now the lateral wall. The lateral wall is made up of the greater wing of the sphenoid. This is the greater wing of the sphenoid on and the zygomatic bone. This zygomatic bone and this zygomatic bone lies the Whitnall's tubercle. The roof of the orbit is made up of the orbital plate of the frontal bone. This is the frontal bone which makes the roof and the lesser wing of the sphenoid. This is the lesser wing of the sphenoid. The medial wall is made up of the maxilla. It is made up of the maxillary bone, the lacrimal bone. This is the lacrimal bone, the ethmoid bone, and the body of the sphenoid. This is the superior orbital fissure which lies between the greater and the lesser wing of the sphenoid. The superior orbital fissure it lies between the greater and the lesser wing of the sphenoid, and on the lesser wing of the sphenoid lies the within the lesser wing of the sphenoid lies the optic canal. In my next video I'll be talking about the orbital margins and the respective the roof, the floor, and the medial wall. Till then, keep studying. Bye bye.